What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another Cryptid Saturday, and in this video today we are going over the Cryptids of Colorado. So full disclosure, whoa. Yep, that happened. That was my cat dive bombing. Anyway, so full disclosure on this one, I couldn't find one article that had any real interesting thing. Colorado isn't really big on cryptids. I did spend a lot of time there growing up, and I guess it's just not worthy of articles. So what I did was I just found a list, and then I went and looked up those individual creatures, and I feel like we could go ahead and talk about them. So yeah, without further ado though, guys, please real quick go ahead and remember to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, follow me on all my social medias, which will be at the end of the video, so stick around to find out what all those are. Drop a comment down below with any cryptids you would like for me to cover in a future video. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this video, the Cryptids of Colorado. Comes from the OutThereColorado.com and the creepy obscure history of the Colorado vampire and where you can find his grave. So that's interesting. Was this like a real thing? From Count Dracula to Edward Cullen, vampires have been a major reoccurring component of legends and folklore passed around the world for centuries. In fact, vampire lore has been so ambiguous across the globe at different times in history that many regions practiced special burials for people who lived to be vampires so they could not come back to life after death. One of the earliest recordings of blood drinkers was from Italy around 1576. A grave was discovered from this era in 2006. It held the remains of an adult woman that had bricks shoved through her teeth and jaw and known vampire detracting practice for the time. Believe it or not, Colorado has its own vampire story that has been passed down through the years. There's limited information. Todor Glava, a man buried in an old cemetery in Lafayette, Colorado, but rumors persist he may have been a vampire. What is known is that Glava was an immigrant from Romania who settled in Colorado in the early 1900s. He also reportedly worked as a coal miner during his life. Tall, pale, and thin, according to some reports, Glava later died in December of 1918 during the peak of Spanish flu pandemic, a disease that claimed the lives of an estimated 50 million people worldwide. Today is simple hand-carved headstone reads, Todor Glava, born in Transylvania, a single spindly tree grows just behind the headstone. And that's the headstone. Sometime after his death, the rumors began to fly that Todor was something more sinister than meets the eye. Local stories even suggest that the townspeople later dug up Todor's body and found that his teeth were abnormally long and he had blood on and in his mouth, and his fingernails never stopped growing. See, that's just something that happens during rigor mortis, though. Like, whenever your body, essentially, like, your skin shrinks to your skeleton and your muscles and all that stuff, like, start to tighten, everything starts tightening. So, like, your hair follicles that are under your skin will come out, so it looks like your hair is growing. Your gums and your lips will, like, retract, so it looks like your teeth are getting longer. And your fingernails are just keratin, and they're, like, pushed back, so your cuticles, so it looks like your nails grew. And that's, like, what a lot of people think started the whole thing with vampires. They came to the conclusion that Todor must have been awaking from the dead to feast on the blood of the people of Lafayette. They promptly staked his heart in an attempt to ensure that he would not come back to life. Again, granted, there is no recorded evidence to substantiate this story. The tale goes on to say that the tree growing near his plot originally sprouted from the stake, and that the nearby rose bush are his fingernails, still growing from the casket. That'd be kind of cool if it was true. The one constant in the evolution of the vampire legend has been its close association with disease. In a time when information on how diseases spread was not common knowledge, it may have been easier for people to create a villain that they understood and could blame for death and illnesses. It may have granted them a scene of control over their lives by protecting themselves from vampires instead of facing what much more deadly at the time, the Spanish flu. So it was easier to deal with vampires than what is now a common cold. That's kind of scary when you think about it. In hindsight, evidence posts to Todor Glava being an innocent man whose death got wrapped up in town conspiracies that were potentially rooted in stereotypes about Transylvania. Along with the story comes a history of supernatural sightings at Todor's gravesite, A tall, dark figure believed to be the spirit of Totor has been reported lingering around Stone on occasion ever since. What do you think? Was Totor an innocent man, or is it possible he was actually a vampire? Um, I'm going with innocent man on that one. I feel bad for the guy. I mean, he died. He obviously it wasn't an unmarked grave, so somebody must have actually enjoyed him. But yeah, on that one personally, I'm thinking probably a poor guy, poor creepy old guy that was misunderstood, and, then rigor set in. It's kind of funny they like legit dug him up though. Like they were that certain this was a vampire, and we are digging him up. We are staking him through the heart, even though he's already dead, and yeah, and then a tree grew out of the stake, which I highly doubt that's true, but that would be really cool too. Now, these ones are called Tommyknockers. I guess they lived in mines? Yeah, this might be kind of interesting. This one's from legendsofamerica.com. Tommyknockers of the Western Mines. Mining is an ancient profession, and along with the backbreaking work and dangers of working in the dark underground comes truly old superstitions. The most notable being that of the Tommyknockers. These impish gnome-like men are the Cornish equivalent of Irish leprechauns and English brownies. Germans called them Burgester or Bergmannillen, meaning mountain ghost or little miners. Others believe these little men were the souls of Jews who crucified Christ and were sent by the Romans to work as slaves in the tin mines. This belief was so strong that the Tommyknockers were allegedly never heard on Saturdays nor at times of Jewish festivals. Maybe that's just because nobody was in the mines on Saturdays and they didn't have the Jews to work for them. History is horrible, guys. Like sometimes it's bad. They are about 2 feet tall and often described as greenish in color. They look like men and are most often spied wearing a traditional miner's outfit. Living, breathing beneath the ground, they have been known to have committed both good and bad deeds throughout the centuries, often playing practical jokes and committing random acts of mischief, such as stealing unattended tools and food. So if you lost your pickaxe, blame it on a Tommyknocker. Tommyknockers were first heard of in the United States when Cornish miners worked in the western Pennsylvania coal mines in the 1820s when the California gold rush began. These experienced Cornish miners were welcomed and often sought after by the mine owner. Attempting to recruit more miners, managers often approached the immigrants asking if they'd had relatives back in England who might come to work the mines. The Cornish miners would reply something like this: "Well, me cousin Jack over the Cornwall wouldst come pay, could ye pay his boat ride?" Soon, these many immigrant miners took on the nickname Cousin Jacks, who formed the core of America's early western mining force. As such, their superstition of the Tommyknockers thrived and spread throughout the mines of the West. Huh. So it may not even be in Colorado, they just were like a thing that got brought here from Cornwall. That's actually kind of cool. It's like that's an example of us just sharing history across like the U.S. The name Tommyknockers, pronounced knackers, so Tommyknockers, comes from knocking on the mine walls that often happened just before came-ins, caused by the cracking of the earth and timbers. Some thought the sounds of hammering were malevolent, indicating certain death or injury. Others saw their knocking as a well-meaning warning to the miners that a life-threatening collapse was imminent. Yet others believed that the knocking sounds would lead them to a rich ore body and or signs of good luck. When these grizzled little gnomes were good, they were thought to bring miners favors and wealth, but when they were bad, they were said to bring about misery, injury, and death to those who doubted their power and did not believe in them. This is getting morbid really fast. These highly animated characters were also known to perform many of the mining duties, working right alongside the men, being blamed for many a prank, and is credited with saving the lives of many miners. If a hammer was missing, it was the Tommyknockers who had taken it. But if a miner escaped a collapse, the Tommyknockers were given the credit. That's interesting. Later, the legend of the Tommyknockers evolved into the idea that the knockings were caused by dead miners who were kind enough to give warning of danger to the living. In praise of these kind gestures, the miners would leave food and other items to secure their good graces and protection. In some mines, where the Tommyknockers' presence was known to be overwhelmingly malevolent, the mines were forced to close because of the men's fear of the spirits. When the mines played out, the legend continued, as many said the Tommyknockers found work in the homes surrounding the old mine shafts. Superstitions continued when many family death or disaster was allegedly foretold by a knocking in the house. Belief in these diminutive miners remained well into the 20th century until modern systems and education replaced these earlier superstitions. Though not much is heard of the Tommyknockers today, they will forever have a place in our history, legend, and lore. Colorado sightings tracks hard to ignore. January 14th, 2001. A pair of hikers emerged from the Snowman's Wilderness last summer with a wild tale. Several Bigfoot shadowed them for 2 nights, they said, peering into their camp and even walking right up to the tent as they listened in fear and awe. Forced to make camp in a high pass as a storm approached, David Riley poked his head out of his tent August 22nd and found a giant creature with glowing eyes standing on 2 legs and staring at him from just outside of camp. I was stunned, said Riley, a Manhattan public relations professional hiking with a friend from Crested Butte to Snowmass. The thing was huge. I thoroughly believe now, that's for sure. So I guess he didn't believe in Bigfoot, and now all of a sudden he does because he literally saw one. While Riley's tale was riveting, Colorado Bigfoot researchers were more excited about last spring's events along the Eagle River, where 2 fly fishermen found giant human-like footprints several days and 7 miles apart. Bell Hiker, a Colorado Division of Wildlife biologist, examined a photo of one of the tracks, a deep impression of an 18-inch, 5-toed foot found by former Vail resident Bill Bryce, just feet from the Rise Eagle River on April 2nd. Hiker came away believing that it was not fake, an assessment shared by Eagle County Sheriff Deputy Don Kaufman. So even the sheriff looked at it and thought it was real. So that's got to give it some kind of a credence, you think? Hiker passed a photo of the track around to other state biologists. Nobody, including myself, had any good answers, he said. It wasn't made by a bear, it wasn't made by a human, and why would anyone be barefoot at that time of year? Colorado has not been the traditional focus for research into Bigfoot, but stories of big hairy apes appear in traditional Native American tales and run through the mining area to modern times. Coloradians have reported seeing the animals walking along a stream below Loveland Pass, drinking from a pond in the Lost Creek Wilderness, running after deer in the Roosevelt National Forest, chasing cars in gypsum, and roaring at hikers, campers, fishermen in various locations. The reports have come from scientists, medical professionals, wildlife biologists, and elk hunters. Hiker, who works in the Division of Wildlife Eagle Field Office, excluded hoax as a possible explanation for the Eagle River track, in part because whatever made the track had placed it in a hard to spot area, a stony riverbank that was soon flooded by snowmelt. So basically his idea is, oh, well, this isn't real, but just no one would think to put a track there to fake it. I don't know how real that is. I mean, at this point, like, I feel like Bigfoot activists or anyone trying to fake it would know that, like, we're looking for things like that. Like, oh, if I move this bush and just put it one here, then if somebody finds it, they're going to for sure think it's Bigfoot. If you were going to perpetrate a hoax, you'd put it in an area where people were likely to stumble on it. I don't know. The fact that Grand Junction resident Vern Parsons discovered similar tracks west of Gypsum several days earlier also got hikers' attention. And I might be pronouncing that name wrong. You guys should let me know what you guys think, because that may or may not be right. Kaufman, the sheriff's deputy, examined the Eagle River print, which he said was pressed deep into the riverbank. You're looking at something that would weigh probably 400 to 700 pounds to make an impression that deep, he said. I mean, so that one could have been a bear. I don't know. There was nothing we could come up with from our background, education, and experience to say what it was. Hiker added, we couldn't even narrow it down. Idaho State University anthropologist Jeff Mulder, who studies Bigfoot tracks, examined the same photos as Hiker and read a detailed investigation report compiled by Kansas bow hunter and Bigfoot researcher Keith Foster. Meldrum said the eagle tracks had all the hallmarks of the tracks he examined from the northwest. Foster has investigated dozens of. There was nothing we could come up with from our background, education, and experience to say what it was, Hiker added. We couldn't even narrow it down. Idaho State University anthropologist Jeff Muldrum, who studies Bigfoot tracks, examined the same photos as Hiker and read a detailed investigation report compiled by Kansas bowhunter and Bigfoot researcher Keith Foster. Meldrum said the eagle tracks had all the hallmarks of the tracks he's examined from the Northwest. Foster has investigated dozens of Colorado reports for the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, including Bryce's. Foster believes he and other researchers have identified at least 3 areas of constant ape activity along the state's rugged high country. Some locations have produced a stream of Bigfoot reports for 120 years. Reports of the Lake Creek Monster made a Leadville papers in the early 1880s. More than a century later, retired Bureau of Land Management wildlife biologist Richard D. McCauston began to study Bigfoot after hearing primate-like screams near the National Fish Hatchery in Leadville. Foster said he had more than one encounter with his elusive quarry. I'm convinced that you don't find Bigfoot, they find you. He said that's like the definition of like so many like movies. The closer to their home base you are, the more likely they will be curious. Riley, the Manhattan hiker, said he certainly wasn't looking for a Sasquatch when he and a friend began to trek from Crested Butte to Snowmass Lake. But on the evening of August 22nd, Riley said he stepped out from the tent after a heavy rain shower and saw a giant with highly reflective eyes staring back at him from the edge of the camp, while 2 apparent juveniles peeked around the giant's bulk. That to me just sounds like a bear. I'm not saying that the guy didn't see a Bigfoot, but like, in my opinion, this seems like more of a misidentification. Paralyzed, the 32-year-old Riley summoned up the courage to turn on his headlamp. When he did, he said his fear morphed to terror. Riley said he stared at the animal, struggling to make sense of what he saw. It was definitely over 8 feet tall. Its eyes were huge, and the glow was unlike any other animal I'd ever seen. I was flipping out. Quite frankly, bro, I would have been too. Like, that makes perfect sense to me, and it's perfectly understandable. Another apparent hotspot is the Conejos drainage of southern San Juan, where Foster is searching for the giant ape that he said his father and mother surprised next to a cabin 8 years ago. They said the creature looked like and was built like a hairy, dark chocolate brown, very muscular man with sloping forehead and a point at the back of its head. Before the animal sprinted off on 2 legs down a hill and across the stream, they estimated its height at 8 feet because the top of its head was even with the eaves of the cabin. One 16-inch track was left by the silt by the stream. Custon's encounter came on October 23, 1994 at about 1:30 a.m. He was trying to sleep in a cold camper near Mount Massive when he heard 2 enormous bellows next to his camper. It sounded like a really huge man, said the former Marine, a Vietnam combat veteran. It was loud enough for that it almost like you could feel the sound. A third focus of reports center on the Pike National Forest, where Foster has investigated a series of sightings to the west of Colorado Springs, and where big game guide Jeff Deisner reported 2 encounters in as many years. In September 1998, Deisner and another guide were packing out 4 clients when a large bipedal animal off a bank in front of his startled horse and disappeared down a hillside. A year later, Deisner was bow hunting alone one morning when he watched a 7-foot-tall reddish-brown ape through binoculars in clear light for several minutes. It almost sounds like these guys are seeing gorillas. I mean, does that make sense? I mean, maybe that's what Bigfoot is, too. It could just be a gorilla, but like, it really does sound to me like these guys are seeing gorillas. I've been hunting all my life, said Deisner, an Army vet and hunter since the age of 12. I had some of the best optical equipment money could buy. At 150 yards, you're not going to miss too much, unless you're a 7-foot-tall gorilla running around this part of the world. There was nothing else it could have been. Hiker and Division of Wildlife bear biologist Tom Beck aren't so sure. While the high county is certainly able to swallow up large objects like any number of plane wrecks, they believe a lot more people ought to be reporting evidence of Bigfoot. Eagle Valley is very popular with lion hunters and bear hunters who use dogs. Hiker said they're out there all winter looking for tracks. These guys are pretty knowledgeable woodsmen, and I've never heard a credible report out of them. Yeah, so, okay, full disclosure, to me it seems like these guys are seeing bears. But, I mean, it could be Bigfoot. I mean, it does hit all the hallmarks of what you would look for with a Sasquatch. So, I mean, in my mind, probably is a Bigfoot of some kind, potentially. There's been a lot of sightings in a lot of different places, and Colorado has tons of wilderness that you would never find anything there if you weren't actively looking for it. So, I don't know, but those are some cool stories. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please drop a comment down below with, you know, what you guys thought of the cryptids we went over in this one. I know there wasn't a lot, but you know, just let me know what you think. I think the Tommyknockers were kind of interesting. I like how that's a carryover from basically a different country and how we kind of made it our own here in America. But yeah, though, guys, with all that being said, please remember to like this video, subscribe to my channel, turn on that notification bell, drop comments down below with what you guys thought and what you guys would like to see me cover in the future. Follow me on all my social medias, and I will see you guys in the next video.